Hey there, it is Liz Wright, professor of psychology at Northwest Vista College in San Antonio, Texas. And today I want to talk to you about a learning strategy that might be useful for your classes if you are a psychology major or if you are studying almost anything. And so today we are going to talk specifically about something called retrieval practice. So I'll be doing some short videos throughout the semester to help you learn to use psychological research in order to do better in your classes, to remember things more, to learn hopefully more quickly, and also to retain that information that you are learning. So the topic for this video is what we call retrieval practice. And so as I said, we are going to be using cognitive psychology, so part of research in psychology to help us learn and remember better. So cognitive psychology is an area of psychology that focuses on the mind and on thinking, including our memory. And so, as I said, we'll be using research from psychology in order to help us do better in our psychology classes. So first we want to define what is retrieval. So when we create memories, they go into our short-term and then our long-term memory, which you would learn more about in a cognitive psychology class. You may have learned about in your general psychology class. When we are reaching into the brain and pulling back out that information, we are doing what is called retrieval. So when we have to write an answer to a essay question, and there's just a short prompt that says, explain cognitive dissonance, we have to pull that information, we have to retrieve it from our brain in order to answer the question. Whereas with, say, multiple choice questions, what we're doing is recognizing the answer as opposed to retrieving it. So as you can probably imagine, retrieval is a lot more challenging than recognition is. But when we learn things and we practice using retrieval with that information that we're learning, it will actually help us to remember it much better and to be able to maintain that memory. So retrieval basically means we're bringing previously learned information to mind. So again, we are retrieving it from our memory. And the more we retrieve it, the stronger the learning and that memory become. So one thing that a lot of students tell me when I ask, how did you study for this test? They say, well, I reread my notes. I reread my textbook. And I want to ask you to do something real quick. So I want you to close your eyes and I want you to imagine the Apple logo. So I want you to think about, which way does the stem of the apple point? Does it point right? Does it point left? Is there a bite in the apple? If so, is it on the right or on the left? Is the bottom of the apple flat or does it have curves? So what are the very specifics of the information about that apple? And actually, I got this example from the book Smart Teaching, Stronger Learning, in the chapter on retrieval practice by Janell Blunt. So you may actually have a pretty good memory of what this looks like, but you may not. So here it is. So everything points to the right, and there are two bumps on the bottom. So why does this relate to retrieval and rereading? Basically, we can see something often, such as a logo, but not actually remember the particulars of it. In the same vein, we can reread information and, reading the words, and it goes into our memory, but we may not be able to identify or describe or summarize a concept just because we've read about it. Okay, so let's talk about some strategies that we can do in order to do some retrieval practice. So one thing that we can do is after we've read, we can do something that teachers might call a brain dump. And that's basically sitting down either at our laptop or with a piece of paper and a pen and writing, typing out whatever we remember. So, kind of dumping the things that are in our brain onto the computer screen or onto our paper. Research actually shows that we should probably do it by handwriting as opposed to by typing. Because it involves more memory strategies and more movement, but that's a topic for another day. So then we can actually look back on those things that we have dumped from our brain and use those as reminders of information that we've learned. And this is similar to if you think about journaling at the end of your day to remind yourself of what was, what made you happy today or what you were grateful for. It's kind of similar to that in that it forces you to revisit that information and to summarize it in a different way than maybe you thought about it at the time, or if you were summarizing a textbook, it's different than how you read it. So you're putting it into your own words, which helps you to remember it better. Another strategy for retrieval practice is application. So you want to apply everything that you're learning. So you don't want to just memorize definitions, but you want to think about, what is an example of this from my life? How might I use this information? Application is going to be really useful. Also, questioning as you're reading, writing down questions in the margin or in your notes, asking your instructor those questions or Googling those questions can really help you to apply and kind of think more about the topic that you're learning about. Another good strategy is to draw out the things that you're learning about, whether it's to draw relating to the topics, so drawing pictures relating to the vocabulary, or even drawing out some sort of map showing for yourself how in your brain these concepts are related, how they're different, etc. We also want to review the headers of a textbook. So if we're looking through our textbook, we'll see that each section has like a bold or larger header. And sometimes it's a question, sometimes it's a concept. And if it's a question, once we finished reading that section, we want to go back to that heading. We want to cover up our book and we want to read that heading and go, okay, can I answer this question in my own words, not in, specifically the words of the book. So a lot of these things, we want to make sure we're doing them without using our textbook, without using our notes, so that again, we're just focusing on, stretching our brain, exercising our brain with that information that we're learning for our class. And then another strategy that some of you may have already used is flashcards. Some courses have flashcards built into them. Some of them you might want to make your own flashcards. There's online flashcards, there's paper flashcards. One thing that's important about using flashcards, though, is again, we don't want to just be reading through them. So we don't want to look at the concept and then flip it, look at the definition and move on to the next one. Because again, that's very similar to just reading and rereading our textbook. What we want to do instead is to look at the front of the card, whatever the front of the card has on it, and then out loud say our answer to it. So if it has a question of, if you're taking a history class, what year did this thing happen? Then you want to say out loud to yourself, I think it happened in this year because of this and that. And then you can flip to see if you're accurate. Now, if you find that you're accurate on specific cards, what you could do is put those cards off to the side and start reviewing those every 2 or 3 days, as opposed to reviewing them every day, because we do want to be doing retrieval practice every single day. We want to be consistently practicing for each of our classes every single day, even if it's 5 to 10 minutes for every class that we're taking. Okay. So with flashcards, remember it's not just, look, look, move on to the next one, but it's, look, answer the question, give the definition of the term, and say that out loud, and then flip the card to see if we are correct. So another thing that we can do is if we're working on our own journal or brain dump activity, if you're in my social psychology class, we had something called the semester journal, where after each unit, you're supposed to journal about what you learned, what you found interesting in that unit. And that specific activity, that specific assignment came from the research on cognitive psychology for learning and remembering and applying information. So there's a reason behind it. There's research behind doing those journal activities. It isn't just something to give you points. So if you're having trouble thinking of things that you should journal about, or if you're trying to do a brain dump activity after you've done your reading, and you don't really know what you should write about, then these are some suggestions for things that you can write about. So defining key terms in your own words, listing the main components of a concept or of a process. And so, anything that's in brackets, then obviously you would change that to content related to the unit that you just studied. Okay, so in this video, we talked about retrieval and what it is. Hopefully you can take out a piece of paper right now and you can write down retrieval and what retrieval is in your own words. And then you can write down a couple of examples of retrieval strategies that you could try. If you are in my social psychology class and you're trying to use this information for your journals, there is a page of prompts that will help you to kind of think of, what do I want to write in this journal? How do I want to use this as my brain dump to remind myself of, the concepts that I learned from this unit. So if you have questions about this strategy, please feel free to ask me. I will be happy to answer your questions for you.